we can have it later. So, so this lecture is all about reflecting critically, and whereas most of our lectures generally are factual and giving you bits of knowledge and so on, this one is very much skills based. So trying to support you in developing your skills in terms of criticality, and it's so important in every way, in everything that you write and so on, and professionally as well, that you adopt this sort of mindset. I've just realized I'm not running the PowerPoint. So so probably today you probably won't take as many notes as normal in a lecture, but I really want you to try and kind of all the time be thinking, how can you adopt these ideas and these practices within your writing, but also in terms of your professional practice. So the aims of the session, we're going to be looking at, what does critical reflection mean? How can we reflect critically in our professional practice? So some of you may be involved in working with children now, some of you may not be, that's okay, but some of you will be going on to do, we encourage you to do some sorts of work experience and placements and things, which gives you a good experience for your CV anyway. But if you are working, I know many of you do work in with children at the moment, obviously these ideas will apply to you straight away. For others of you, you need to be sort of holding them in your mind for as you're involved in professional work in the future. So so we're encouraging to reflect on your professional practice, but also to reflect on your academic practice as well. So so that's the plan in this session. So we'll move on to the next slide. So what is not critical reflection? And I kind of wanted to include this slide because it's really important to be sure what we're talking about here, because sometimes students think, all I just need to do is say a negative thing about that person, or a negative judgment, and that's me reflecting. So let's say, for example, if Froebel is talking about the importance of play, some people think, oh, if I'm reflecting critically, I need to say that Froebel is wrong and play isn't important. That's not critical reflection. That's just saying something against Froebel. Some people think that it's summarizing a concept. So, for example, Froebel's books and books, all these ideas and things. If I just summarize it, then that's me reflecting. It's not. And so we'll move on now to look at what it is. Some people even think saying what you think of an idea. So Froebel talked about play and so on such a lot. I think this is a good idea. So some people think that is critical reflection, but it's not. So it's very important that we kind of grasp the things. That's not critical reflection. Critical reflection is very much a mindset, which is so much more than that. And it's what we really want to be encouraging you to be doing as part of your academic journey, but also your professional journey. So what is critically reflecting? Sometimes we call it critiquing, by the way. So if ever we mention that critiquing, it's the same sort of thing. So spending time carefully considering. And what I wanted to emphasize about that is that you cannot do this in like 5 minutes. And so for some students, would you believe, some students leave their writing till the last moment. Not many, of course, but I'm afraid I was always the geeky one who didn't like to leave it to the last moment. But I know that my brother, we studied at the same sort of time. He was always leaving his to the last moment. So we had very much interesting dynamics in our house. And you know what? Everybody's different and everybody works in their own way. And you need to find your own way of doing that. And if you kind of find it better to leave it to the last moment, that's fine. But you need to find some time and space within that to make sure that you have space for critical reflection as well. So that because if you rush a piece of work, if you don't allow time to carefully consider, then it really shows to us as markers as we're reading it. So that's really important in terms of kind of spending time carefully considering. So what we're saying is critical reflection. If there's an idea here, let's say you know, about the outdoors, so it's important to be in the outdoors or something, then actually I'm going to pause and just think about that before I start writing down all about it. So that's important. And then the second one is that the process of meaning making from an experience or an idea. So what we mean by that is that so let's say I have an experience of I don't know, I'm in the park and going for a walk, and I can see children playing, let's say, and they're playing in the leaves and throwing them all around, and I can see various people that they're with, different adults interacting, rather than just sort of walking past and thinking, oh, that looks like quite a nice afternoon they're having. Actually, to kind of pause and reflect, and to kind of think, oh, what kind of meaning could I see in that? So not to sort of sit there and stare at them, and to kind of be thinking about, you know, all that kind of thing in that way, in a kind of weird sort of way, but actually to be kind of thinking, oh, now that's really interesting, because which of my different experiences and my different mindsets and knowledge and understandings and theories could I apply to that setting? And we could perhaps think about the importance of nature, creativity, freedom, expression. We could think about how good it is to be outdoors. We could think about relationships and personal connections and so on, and partnerships with parents and so on. So these are the kind of things we want to allow time for making meaning, for understanding things a bit more fully, and having this process of questioning our deeply held assumption. So what I mean by that is, let me think, something I deeply hold as a kind of belief. Well, I could tell you all sorts of things I deeply hold as beliefs, but let me go for this one, that chocolate is basically the center of the universe. Okay, so we'll go with that deeply held assumption, and that is very deeply held. I'm not even joking about that one. Okay, so that's kind of literally, that is the center of the universe. So, however, if I was going to critically reflect on that, I would just pause and kind of question it. And I would say, you know what, is that actually sort of the right thing? Is it the best thing for me health-wise, if that's all I'm ever doing? Is that the best thing for me in terms of kind of diet, in terms of my health and so on like that? So I'm going to pause on it, even money wise, you know, is that a good use of my money? So pausing and kind of thinking about this is really important, and allowing me to actually question what I'm thinking. So also, I think I remember a time when I was starting on my PhD, and the guy who turned out to be my supervisor. So for those of you who perhaps don't know, the way it works with a PhD, you have like it's like a personal tutor, but it's your PhD supervisor. You spend an awful lot of time with them over the sort of 5-6 year period, and they challenge you and encourage you and inspire you and ask difficult questions and so on. And I remember him saying to me, because my PhD was about children and Christian faith, and he was saying to me, he wanted to know that I was willing to question my deeply held assumptions about faith. And unless I was willing to be kind of open and to kind of question those and to be able to reflect critically, he wasn't as keen to supervise me and to take on me as one of his students. And actually, at the time, I didn't quite appreciate it quite as much, but I did then realize as I went along the journey how important that is. Because if we are true academics and we are truly researching and finding out what do these things mean for children, what in reality do these theories relate to, and so on, actually it's really important that we're open-minded and that we allow ourselves to question. So even in the essays that you're doing, it's important to kind of be thinking, now hang on, am I thinking this just because this is what I deeply think, or am I thinking this because I've read about it and reflected, and then now I've thought about this? So really important that you challenge your own assumptions, and also alongside that you view from alternative perspectives there. So let's say somebody who didn't think chocolate was the center of the universe, it's important that I actually consider their viewpoint as well, rather than just saying, no way, you know, you are wrong, chocolate is really, really important. So in our interactions professionally, we need to be open-minded, and consider other people's opinions, and we need to be reflecting on what does theory say, how could that relate to practice, but also in terms of our academic writing. And I've got an example here. So, for example, I talked about if you're in the park and around the trees and seeing kids playing in the leaves and so on. Here's another example here of process of meaning making from an experience. So we could see this photo and we could just sort of say, well, let's, walk along this street with and just kind of walk past. Or we could pause and we could say, what can we learn from this? What meaning could we make from this picture in this instance? We could see that there's 3 children there walking along. We could comment. You did a little bit of this kind of thing in your first photo activity on this course when you're looking at photos and pictures. But think about what is their relationship together? What is the relationship of those children with the adults that they're walking past in the street? We could think about in terms of their clothing. We could think about what about their kind of the environment that they're walking along in. We could think about the surroundings that they have, the climate even that they have, the safety. What about the surface that they're walking along? What about the materials that are around them? The stimulation of all of the colors. Perhaps are there sights and sounds there? So what could we pause and think of? What is the meaning that's going on in that thing? But it's also important that we don't assume and that we don't have those deeply held assumptions, and that I don't perhaps think, perhaps if I've got kind of some kind of experience in the past where, I'm making this up, there's a man looking at those children. What's he going to do to them? Is he going to mistreat them or something? And so perhaps I'm having that thought, but it's important that I then think, right, is that coming from an assumption that I'm making? Is there an alternative thought to that? Is there an alternative idea? And to then think about that. So it's really important that we're constantly thinking, could there be a different interpretation of this? Here's another one. I thought this was a really fun picture when I saw it. So thinking about the process of questioning. Again, here, you might look at this and think, oh my goodness, what a mess. That's just so inappropriate. They're standing on the bed, which is just not allowed. They're making such a mess. They're destroying those pillows, so that's one sort of school of thought. But also there's a school of thought which perhaps would say they're having so much fun. Look at the joy on their faces. Even you could talk about the physicality, the sensory experiences that they're perhaps having. Perhaps you could talk about the relationships, the relational element of that. And so again, it's important to be thinking there of different viewpoints. And so in terms of critical reflection, we really want to encourage you to be using your toolkit of knowledge and understanding. So I keep saying this, all the way through this course, we're giving you more and more things to put in your imaginary toolkit of knowledge. So you know about the pioneers now, you know about the EYFS, you know about constructs of childhood. We're talking about different environments and cultures around the world and so on. So we're constantly giving you more and more things to put in your toolkit, but you need to use those to help you to critically reflect. So it's not just that we would look at a picture like that and say, oh, that's cute, full stop. Actually, we'd look at that and we'd say, right, what theories do we know that might connect in with that? What ideas of how children are creative? What ideas about physicality? What theories do I know that I could connect in? So it's really, really important that we're using that toolkit of knowledge and understanding to kind of examine what we're looking at, examine concepts and experiences and so on. And I've got a short video I wanted to show to you now, just in terms of kind of an example of an idea that people might have. So this is just part of a, let me just share the screen. This is just from this video clip here from Brain Matters documentary. I'll just make it bigger. And it's actually 4.5 minutes, but we're just going to watch a very short snippet. And sorry, let me just turn that on. Okay. And basically they're saying these are things that will help children to develop. And so we're going to just watch this and then think about how we could reflect on that critically together. So we're just going to watch 30 seconds or a minute of it.
And help give your baby the best start in life. The sounds and gestures that babies make might not seem like much, but it's their way of communicating with you. Science says we should stimulate baby talk and treat it as real conversation. So respond to their sounds, cues and actions and talk to them, engaging them in everything that happens. And if you do it using a clear, sing-songy voice, the results are surprising. The number of words a baby is exposed to will determine the number of words a child will produce at age 2, and even reading levels later on. So take baby babble seriously, and by all means, encourage it.
Okay, and we'll pause there. So this video's got a few different ideas in it there, but we will return to our PowerPoint. So what they were saying there was that talking to your child and kind of expanding their language is really, really important. Now, it's difficult for me to critique that and to reflect upon that, because I fully agree with that. I've read so many books which talk about that and talk about the importance of that. I've seen that in terms of my own children. If I talk a lot, they will kind of want to talk back and so on. But it's important for me to critically reflect upon that, even if it's something that I agree with. So perhaps I would say, are there any alternative perspectives? Has this always been the case? Have people always championed this idea of language and so on? And actually, if we look back historically into different times, we would see that actually people didn't always agree with this. People didn't always think that you should speak to a young child. And that we could go and find some literature which talked about actually how language doesn't begin until a certain age. So very different kind of ideas there. But also in terms of cultures, it would be interesting to think about what different cultures think about that. And I could go off and search on journals and so on to see if different cultures think differently about language and language development in young children. So that's trying to find out if people have different perspectives. But also, as I'm critically reflecting on that, I might think, right, okay, so they're talking about young children's language development. How might that connect with the EYFS and the Key Stage 1 and the other curriculums and learning environments that we've talked about? So we could think about the unique child, for example, which is one of the principles of the EYFS. And we could think, right, so that person in that video from Brain Matters has just been talking all about that. But each child is unique, it says in the EYFS. That's one of the key principles. Actually, does that agree or disagree? Well, actually, it could support it, couldn't it? Because we could say, if we have an understanding of children being unique, then actually we could use that understanding to help us to communicate with children. Even when they're babbling and making sounds and things, we can talk to them and communicate with them in their own unique way, rather than assuming just because they're babbling, that doesn't make sense. And that kind of universal idea. So unique child, for example, of the EYFS would really support that. So you notice there that actually I've come up there with something which is the same. It supports it, but that's part of critical reflecting. It's just taking the time to ponder and think, how could bits of the EYFS connect in with that idea? But also I could think about different pioneers that we've talked about. And perhaps, you know, I could talk to you about the Macmillan sisters and their kind of ideas about how the parents are really important. And you know, maybe I can't find a reference which talks about what the Macmillan sisters think about language development and babbling and whether that's important, but I could very easily find a reference that talks about the Macmillan sisters and how they strongly believe that parents were important, and they wanted to empower and equip parents in terms of supporting their child's learning journey. And so then I could make the link and think, do you know what, that could connect. And if I'm kind of critically reflecting and thinking, right, so that the Macmillan sisters spoke about parents being important, this Brain Matters research here has talked about how language is important. What if I now write about how parents supporting the child's language is key? And so therefore then I'm making another link. So can you see there, hopefully, how actually just by looking at this one idea in there, that I can just pause and, again, like I said, look into my toolkit of different ideas and things, and reflect on how it might be in different ideas, different perspectives, but reflect how it connects with theory and so on, like that. Okay, so a mindset for critical reflection. I've already talked about being open-minded, and that's part of this thing of not necessarily, when you pick up a concept that you're going to evaluate or critique, when you pick up an idea or something, or just a quote even, you're going to have an open mind. You're going to choose, right, even though I agree with this, or even though I disagree with this, I'm going to be open-minded. I'm going to explore whether there are alternative perspectives. So that open-mindedness is really, really important. You can really see clearly through students' work if they're sort of very staunch and they've got these clear things and they haven't taken time to be open-minded and to just look a little bit around them and see if there's different ideas. Leave aside your assumptions and your preconceptions. You can bring them in to what you're writing, absolutely. But while you're just reflecting and considering before you start writing, you need to leave them aside and explore in an open-minded way. Also, scrutiny of practice is really important. So, as I said, this is connecting in with your professional practice as well. So, scrutinizing it is looking in great detail. It's really digging in depth, rather than just when you're writing. If you perhaps say, the Brain Matters team talked about the importance of encouraging a child's babble for their language development. This is supported by the EYFS idea of the unique child, full stop. Well, that's a very superficial, kind of shallow sort of response. Actually, again, if you pause and take time to go more in depth, to scrutinize, to examine, and to do some of what I just spoke about a minute ago, thinking about the EYFS, different pioneers and so on. Looking from different angles, like I've said, the constructs of the child, so from different perspectives, historically or culturally, what would different people think? Even sometimes, what would male and female think? Would they be different? Or different age groups? Would children think the same as their parents and their grandparents? Would different angles view this thing differently? And allow your mind to be changed through the process. This is part of learning. I love this thing that we can just explore and discover as part of the learning process. But actually, really hold in your mind, as you've got this critical reflection mindset, this continual process of development of skills and ideas. So, for myself, I'm getting on in years now, but there's so much that I've learned so far, and actually every single day I'm learning more and more, because I've got an open mind. When I speak to other adults, perhaps at the school gates or something, although I don't get to do that quite as much at the moment with all the restrictions, actually, if they're talking to me about something, I have an open mind, and I'm listening to them and constantly thinking what they're saying. Should I let that adjust what I think? If I go to a nursery setting, and again, I'm looking at good practice and looking for things that are around, I've got an open mind, and I'm allowing what I'm seeing to shape and to slightly tweak what I'm thinking. So let's say, for example, I'm not the biggest artist in the world. I'm really not that good. But actually, when I'm viewing a nursery setting, perhaps I could look and see, oh, you know what? They've done that, and that could be really beneficial. And I'll pick that idea up and hold that in my mind. And that's part of this kind of open-minded, continual process of developing. But equally, on our academic journey, and so this is so important, this continual process that you've constantly got in your mind. Every time I read a page or a chapter or a journal, or we discuss things in class, have an open-minded and think, I'm learning, I'm being a sponge, and I'm continually on this journey of development. So really, really important that. Thinking about how we have this kind of mindset, and an example of this, I wonder what you think is happening in this picture. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to just look at this picture. Think about, what do you think is happening, and jot this down in your notes. No one's going to see. It's just for your own interest. But what do you think is happening in this picture? And are there any alternative interpretations? How could you link this with theories and ideas? And how could you link it with our practical and professional experience? Sorry, that should be your practical and professional experience. I'm going to give you just 2 minutes to have a quick look at that. Jot down your thoughts. Okay, you can always go back and add to this later if you want to, but I'll break into your thoughts there. But these are kind of questions that you can be asking while you are critiquing things, and you've got this kind of mindset of critical reflection. So to think about this, what do you think is happening in the picture? I wonder if you said, those kids are lazy. Why are they just sitting on the ground? They should be running around and doing exercise. That's one interpretation. Are there any alternative interpretations to that? Maybe they've been running around for the last 2 hours and they're exhausted, and they're just having a rest. Maybe they're taking the time to reflect and to be at one with nature. And we could talk about their spiritual experiences that may be happening here. Maybe they are just waiting for their parents to come and collect them. So there's a few different interpretations that we could put on this. And I think it would be wrong for us to assume any one of those, really, or any other, because we just don't know. But we could offer some options if we were writing about this. But look at it with different theories and ideas. Which things in your toolkit of the pioneers could you think about in terms of the importance of the environment? So, for example, Macmillan sisters talked a lot about the importance of the outdoor environment. So we could talk about that here. There's other writers that we've been talking about in terms of nature and the importance of nature. We could talk about the importance, so I think it's more in the core 2 part of the course. We talked a little about spirituality, but we could talk a little bit about that in terms of the importance for a child of connecting with kind of their world, really, in terms of their spirituality. But also, how could we link this with our practical and professional experience? So I wonder if ever any of you have been to the park with kids and you've seen them like this, and what you can kind of bring of your experience there. So we're going to have, so that was kind of a bit of an overview of how we can critically reflect. Now this next section is going to give you some of the kind of theories behind this, because there's a lot of people who've written loads and loads of books and things all about how we can critically reflect in a kind of beneficial and effective way. And so I'm going to share some of those theories with you now. Honestly, I wouldn't bother writing down these theories because you won't ever really need to refer to these theories of critical reflection in essays or something, but it's just helping us to understand how key this mindset of critical reflection is. And just to draw your attention to that picture there, I thought this was quite a helpful picture that I got of Unsplash yesterday, because we see here an image of somebody standing looking from afar, and actually they're taking time to pause. And I thought this picture is quite a good picture of critical reflection, because the person is obviously perhaps on some kind of journey. They've been somewhere, perhaps they've been running, perhaps they've been walking, because we can sort of see that by the way they're dressed. They've put the hoodie around and so on. So they're going somewhere, but they've taken the time to pause here. And that's really important in your critical reflection, that you take the time to pause, not just to read and write quickly or to write your essay quick because the deadline's in 2 hours, but to take time to pause. And what we can see is that this person is kind of looking at the whole of the landscape. And so she's not just looking at the fence that's right in front of her or the plant that's right in front, but you can see she's looking at the whole landscape. And sometimes I love it if I've just got time to go and sit on a hill somewhere and just watch the whole world go by. And you can choose to see so many different things around in that viewpoint, just like that person can there. And actually, critically reflecting and writing in a critical, reflective way is that sort of thing. It's choosing to pause and to look at the landscape in lots of different sort of ways. So I thought that was quite a nice picture to explain what we're doing. So like I say, don't worry to write these things down, but I'm just explaining the kind of academicness behind critical reflection here. So this is from Donald Schoen. Reflective practice is the link to joint the gap between formal theory and practice. So we've talked about this a lot. We're wanting to help you to connect your theories with practice, with early childhood ideas and so on. Inconsistencies between what is thought to be taking place and what is actually taking place. So we can look for that. We can say, you know, let's say we're reading a quote about I don't know, children do not like technology or something. Someone's done this piece of research and they're saying children don't actually like technology. They don't want to use it. They don't find it helpful. Actually, we can pause and say, do you know what? Is that actually what's happening in practice? And then we can start to talk about that. Equally, perhaps somebody will share an idea about how children's mental health has been affected through school closures, for example, in the pandemic, and we can pause and we can say, is that actually what's taking place in practice? And we can just pause and research that a little bit. Reflective practice is an art. The practitioner is the artist. So again, just like I showed you that image of the individual looking at the landscape, in a way, you are painting the landscape. When you're writing a piece of work, you can imagine that like yourselves being the artist, you're painting a big canvas. And you're going to say, right, over here on this bit here, I'm painting this bit, and this is telling you a little bit about this idea. But also there's another idea here, and I can paint this. So actually you're creating a picture for the reader about lots of different parts of the landscape to do with children's well-being or children's learning or the individual child or whatever it is that you're writing about. Professional practice presents messy, indeterminate situations. So professional practice isn't always nice and clean and tidy. So we can't always look and say, right, children only ever want to do this, because in reality, that's not how it is. And it's often usually a bit messy and so on. Reflection in action as well is really, really important. Okay, so so we are reflecting, but not in a theoretical, cold, hard kind of way, but in a more collaborative and active sort of way. Here's an idea of Dylan William, and he says this. I'd like you to think about what you think of this, and in chat, go to reply privately to me and send me a message in chat. I'd be really interested to know, what do you think of this? Every teacher needs to improve, not because they're not good enough, but because they can be even better. Okay, so I'm just going to pause for 2 minutes there. Oops, sorry, to give you the chance to reflect on what you think of that. Okay, so write in the chat, what do you think about this quote? Every teacher needs to improve, not because they're not good enough, but because they could be even better. So although I've just been saying, I want you to do things in deep and meaningful and scrutinize kind of ways, just tell me 2 sentences maximum. What do you think of this? Do you agree, disagree? Do you think it's important? Do you think there's more important things? And then just a hint of why. Great, so I can see a few people have started to respond, so I'll just wait, give you more of a chance. I'll just read it out one more time. Every teacher needs to improve, not because they're not good enough, but because they can be even better. Great, so I'll just give you another 30 seconds to send your responses of what you think of this. Really interesting ideas there. Thank you. Yeah, interesting. Good, really interesting ideas. Thanks, guys. Good critical reflection. Excellent. Yeah, really, really good ideas. Super. Great. Really, really good. And what I really like about it is that a lot of you are giving reasons which are things that we have talked about on the course. So that's great. It shows that your knowledge and understanding is really growing and developing. So well done. That's really, really interesting. Feel free to submit them if you're still busy typing, but well done. That's really good. And so that is an example then of how you do it in your writing. So you come across this quote and you think, that's really interesting. I think that could connect in with what I'm writing. And then you will pause and you'll think, right, what do I think of that? And so you could think these things that you've just been typing in the chat box. And then you think, right, why do I think that? What theories is that connecting with? The EYFS, different cultures, different pioneers, things like that. So what kind of good quality sources are the reasons for why I'm thinking that? But then to think, right, okay, so we won't do this now, but to think, what could be an alternative perspective to that? So I'll just pop it back onto the screen here. So this quote, every teacher needs to improve. What could be an alternative to that? Perhaps we could say, do you know what? Every teacher is really, really good. The teacher training is fantastic. And we could go off and try and find, are there any people who talk about that kind of thing? Perhaps alternatively, we could say, actually, the teachers aren't important. It's the parents who need to have the training. And we could go off and find out some sources, whether anybody's talked about that. So in that kind of way, we are pausing. We've got an idea here. We're pausing, we're critically reflecting, and then we can put that into our writing. Oops, sorry, I just need to run the slideshow again. Okay, then on the next slide, oh, it's taking your time. There we are. Okay, so on the next slide here, we've got, for example, something you could use to back up your comments about this quote. But professional development should be underpinned by robust evidence and expertise. And so we could find out that about professional development for school teachers and that kind of thing. And we could use that to back up what we're saying. Here's some more ideas about the critically reflective practitioner. Moss discusses how reflective practice should not be interpreted in a way that reduces reflection on how practitioners should conform to imposed norms. And Brookfield talked about critical reflective thinking being our own experiences, the eyes of others that we work for, colleagues, views, theories, and so on. So again, this idea of alternative perspectives and thinking about transformative practice, which is this sense of the continual process of change, like I said earlier. Here are some other things. I'm just going to whiz past these because I want to allow time to talk about our e-portfolio at the end. But here's some other ideas in Reed and Canning about what reflective practice is, and some others. So loads and loads of people have written all about reflective practice and reflective writing and so on. Here we have a piece of research which discusses and defines professionalism in the early years and talks about how engagement with different early childhood education and care policies and practice has been undertaken by practitioners. So that's an interesting one there. Reflective, Wenger talked about reflective practice is an ongoing learning journey. I've mentioned this idea a few times that incorporates personal and professional attributes through our thoughts and actions. So it's this sense of, as I said, it's this continual process. We're on this kind of journey of moving forwards, but we're all the time kind of gathering in, oh, I've got a few of my more things that I've learned on my course today, or I've got a few more things that I've learned in my professional practice today, or in my personal experience, or at any kind of setting, I'm going to gather these up and bring all these ideas with me on my journey of discovery. And here we can see a bit more explanation. In fact, I'm going to click on this link. Hopefully you can, don't know if you can see this now. Hang on, I'm just going to stop my share and then restart it just in case you can't see. So this is a really interesting page you could look up later. I read this and I thought it's really, really helpful actually in terms of critical reflection. So what I'll do actually is I'll type the, I'll copy that into the chat so that you could open it for yourselves later, if that's helpful. Okay, and this is, again, I won't go through it in detail, but basically critical reflection and how to critically reflect. So they talk about analysing as the first phase, but then moving on. So you've got the what and the so what and the now what. So you kind of got that deep scrutiny that we've been talking about. And then articulating it. So how do you formulate that into some sort of writing there? And then in terms of revising it. And so that's a really good example there that I did just want to show you. And then if we pop back to the PowerPoint here, oh, we've whizzed on a little bit there. And I wanted to also show you this YouTube clip. This is a short video that we'll just watch together now, but I'm just going, don't know if that's working, so I will stop the screen share. Oh, I'm not even screen sharing. Okay, so here we are. So I'll just play you this 2-minute video because it's really interesting. It really summarizes well a lot of what I've been saying in this session.
What is critical reflection? We reflect all the time. Anytime we think back on something that happened and imagine how we might do it differently next time. Critical reflection is similar but involves a more formal process. It requires carefully considering how events and experiences have led to personal growth and how we might think or act differently in the future as a result. A critical reflection is not simply a summary of what happened or a report of how you felt during an experience. For a reflection to be critical, you must make connections between what happened, what you learned from that experience, and how you will apply that learning in the future. Your reflection doesn't have to be about a positive or successful experience. We often learn the most when things don't go right. The key is to choose an experience where you learn something important that has changed your beliefs or actions in some way. If you have been asked to relate your experience to specific concepts, make sure you choose an experience that you can relate to those concepts. One model for critical reflection is a 3-stage process known as what, so what, now what, developed by Terry Borton. Let's walk through the 3 stages together. Stage 1. What? What happened in a particular situation? Replay the event in your mind as though it were happening in front of you on a movie screen. What do you see? Be as objective as possible. Try not to attach any judgments at this stage. Stage 2. So what? Analyze the experience more deeply. What was important about the situation for you? How does this experience connect to course concepts? What did you learn? Stage 3. Now what? This stage is about applying what you've learned. How have you changed or grown because of this experience? How will you think or act differently in future situations because of this experience? What are you going to do next? Remember, whatever you are reflecting about, be sure you provide specific examples, explain the significance of what happened, and relate your experience to course concepts. Finally, be sure to explain what you've learned and how you will apply this learning in future situations. For more advice, examples, and templates for writing reflection papers, visit writeonline.ca.
Okay, so hopefully that was helpful to kind of summarize what we've been talking about there. Okay, so I think that brings me to the end. Let me just go back here. So just to summarize there, so that's the summary. And when to use critical reflection? All the time, basically. That's the answer to that one. In any written work that you do, in any conversations that you're having in your seminars, tutorials, and so on, in any professional practice, and even in daily life, really try to adopt this mindset of being open-minded, to pick up ideas from different places, to be kind of continually learning, to allow your mind to be continually shaping and reforming and so on, to be thinking constantly about what knowledge you've got in your toolkit and how it connects with what you're experiencing in that moment. If you want to read more about developing critical reflection, you could read this book. It is available on the university library. So that comes to the end of the section about the critical reflecting. And I'm just going to stop the recording